Hello and welcome to a special show on Budget 2024, just hours before Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman presents the first union budget of Team Modi 3.0. Now, we at Mirror Now understand our viewers perhaps better than anyone else. We know that you don't necessarily care about macro indicators such as current account deficit and forex reserves. You want to know how the budget should and could impact you as the urban, middle-class, salaried taxpayer. Will your monthly in-hand salary take a hit from tomorrow onwards? Will your investment savings lose their value in terms of the interest they gain year after year? What does the salaried class expect from Nirmala Sitharaman ahead of Budget 2024? That's the focus for this show, because this show is about you and about what your wish list is. Now, our team at Mirror Now has drawn out 7 key areas where the salaried class is really hoping for some sort of respite from the Finance Minister. Let's take you through all of them one by one. The first important aspect on the wish list is that of standard deduction. Now, that's currently at 50,000 rupees a year. It's something that has been unchanged for the last 5 years since 2019. The wish list, of course, is that should this be increased to 60,000, maybe even 70,000, to ensure that 70,000% of your salary, of your taxable income, is in the form of standard deductions and is cut every year from the taxable income, so that the percentage of tax you pay on that taxable income is a bit less. The second important part of the wish list, again, is something which we all know when it comes to saving tax. It's about the exemptions in the part of Section 80C of the Income Tax Act. Now, currently, the 80C exemption is at 1.5 lakhs. Now, here's the shocker. That limit has been unchanged since 2014 for the past 10 years, since the Modi government first came to power. Now, just imagine how much the world has changed in the last 10 years in terms of inflation, in terms of cost of living. So, it's a long overdue wish to increase this limit to 2 lakh, maybe even to 2.5 lakh per annum. Then, of course, the exemption limit within income tax, the third important wish list here. Now, currently, remember that it's at 3 lakh per annum. That's, of course, unchanged since 2023. The wish now is to increase. This is, of course, we're talking about the limit, the lower limit of the tax slabs. So, income currently up to 3 lakh is not taxable. The wish is to increase that to 4 lakh per annum, maybe even to 5 lakh, to help the urban youth who've just taken up jobs and have just started their careers, so that they pay a bit less tax. But it's not just the exemptions at the lower end of the tax spectrum, even the higher end as well, which is what brings us to our fourth important point on the wish list. Tax rate deductions here at this point. So far, and this is the fourth important wish we have, tax rate deductions. So far, 30% is the tax levied on all income above 15 lakh per annum, whether it be the old tax regime or the new tax regime. The wish is to lower this to 25% and therefore have another tax slab of the 15 lakh to 20 lakh per annum, where the tax rate is up to 25%, and have the existing 30% tax ceiling apply from a salary of 20 lakh per annum. Because remember, inflation has increased. Overall median salaries have also increased, so the tax slab should also reflect this important point. Fifth, again something which a lot of our viewers from urban India have come out and reported to us on Mirror Now. HRA exemption. This is something I'm sure you're all familiar of every time you file your tax returns. The current rules for HRA exemption is 50% in 4 metropolitan cities: Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai and Kolkata, and 40% HRA exemption elsewhere in the country. Now, anyone will tell you that these are not the only 4 metropolitan cities in the country. This is a criteria that existed in the 70s and 80s. Cities like Bengaluru, cities like Hyderabad, cities like Pune, even cities or satellite towns of Delhi such as Ghaziabad, Noida, Gurgaon, these are all cities which are having cost of living indices as much as that of the regular 4 metropolitan cities. Particularly, I'm referring to Bengaluru. Should they not also be brought in to the 50% HRA exemption bracket? That's an important wish list coming in as well. Next up, we come to deduction limits. Specifically, we're looking at the deduction limits of the NPS, or the National Pension Scheme. Currently, 60% of corpus withdrawn is exempt from any sort of tax. The wish list is increase the amount of money you can withdraw from your NPS schemes without having to pay tax on it, and put it on par with other schemes of tax saving within Section 80C, such as EPF, for instance. The final point, the final important wish list which our viewers have put forward to us, and we on their behalf are putting forward to the government, is that of medical insurance premiums. Now, currently the deduction limit is at 25,000 for individuals and 50,000 for senior citizens. This is the amount you can deduct without having to pay tax. Again, there is a demand, or at least a hope or an expectation from Nirmala Sitharaman to increase this limit to 50,000 for individuals and 75,000 for senior citizens, a net increase of about 25K, so as to reduce the amount of tax paid on this point. Let me now go across to my esteemed panel here. We have been joined by Vijay Sadhana, Senior Economist. At this point, Dr. Santosh Mehrotra, Senior Economist Officer, Lloyd Matthews, Independent Director, and S. Ravi, founder of Ravi Ranjan & Co. and former Chairman of the BSE. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on this very important show here. Once again, the theme of this show and the theme of this debate is going to be on what benefits the salaried middle class or the salaried upper middle class of India expects and gets, because the popular conception has been that that's the one section that has been ignored by successive governments, especially over the last few years. It has been ignored by successive budgets as well. Let me come across to Vijay Sadhana, Senior Economist. I'll start with you, sir. The sentiment, as I was saying, is that for the longest time, the salaried taxpayer has been ignored by subsequent budgets here. What are the logical or the realistic concessions we can expect? Can we look at perhaps an increase in the standard deduction limit or an increase in the tax exemptions under Section 80C?
First of all, good afternoon to fellow panelists and the viewers. See, what is important in the whole approach is that we have to look at quality of life. Now, for quality of life, we need money. Now, here the issue is that when inflation is going up, when overall cost of living is going up, and if income is not going up, definitely it is going to impact the overall quality of life for the citizens of India. Now, it is for the government to decide how they will improve the quality of life. For poor people, definitely they extend the subsidy. But for the middle class, for the salaried class, those who have no additional income, they don't get any perks. They are fixed with their own source of income. But the cost of living, the inflation, which is beyond their control, how the government is going to compensate them? Because they are actually funding the government. Now, if they are funding the government and they are not getting benefit, there's bound to have a stress on the system. And because of that, please also appreciate that this middle class is actually driving your industrial growth and housing growth. Because there is an aspiration in middle class to move into the upper bracket. And they save their income and they spend back into the economy. So more government will do something for them. If their money in hand goes up, definitely the investment in industrial sector goes up, housing sector goes up. So this is a very, very vital thing. Now, problem in the system is because of very high deficit in budgets, government wants to survive at the cost of citizens. Now, this is what becoming whole issue which is challenging. And cost of living is not just the food inflation or day-to-day inflation, even toll taxes are very high. Even the taxes on vehicles are very high. Unfortunately, Government of India, instead of attracting more and more productive capital, which can go into manufacturing and create more jobs and more income, both for government as well as for the citizen, whatever is coming in majority is coming as a hot money for stock market, because everybody knows India is a huge market. So whatever capacities are installed, they will run at full capacity. They will have hefty profits. And once they have a hefty profits, everybody wants to have a profit with the least cost, least risk option. And that is what is going on, unfortunately, in the country. So there is overall, I think the relook is required, how we have to think our budgets.
Yeah. Absolutely. As you pointed out, Mr. Sadhana, there are some very basic indicators which of the current tax slabs, for instance, show that there's a basic out of sync which is existing with realities of cost of living and inflation at this point. Lord Matthews, is that the case that the salaried middle class, or at least the tax-paying class, is being seen as a cash cow? Because some of these provisions don't really make sense. For instance, four metros being Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, and Kolkata, completely ignoring the fact that Bengaluru, for instance, is one of the biggest job providers to the entire nation after Delhi and Mumbai, perhaps. In fact, even more than that, the entire IT sector is based in Bengaluru, yet it doesn't count as a non-metro. Standard deductions have not changed for the past 5 years. ATC limits have not changed for the past 10 years. The tax slabs are still something which are very archaic, because most of our viewers at this point watching this channel, for instance, we would be paying a combined income of perhaps more than 15 lakh per annum. And as a result, they're all in the highest tax bracket possible at this point. Evidently, there is a need for a fundamental rethink as to how, or perhaps redrawing how we tax the middle class in this country.
Hey, thanks for having me on the show, Ritangshu. I think firstly, to address the elephant in the room, I think clearly there is a sense that the taxpayer, who's a small percentage of our population and the middle class, is being taken for granted. He's getting sandwiched between, let's say, the bottom of the pyramid, who obviously and rightly get a lot of freebies, and obviously the ultra rich. So I think it's really the taxpayer who's been subsidizing the economy. And I think one data point that's critical to the points that Mr. Sadhana mentioned, I think, is that now direct income tax as a percentage of government revenue is well ahead of corporate tax. So therefore, large corporations are paying much lesser tax to the government's kitty than do individuals, right? And I think that, to my mind, is a first of its kind, which has happened in the last 2 years. Now, the solution is not to take up corporate taxes, because there is an advantage in the pullback that the Prime Minister did, that the Finance Minister did in 2019, 2017, I beg your pardon. I think there are some key elements that the middle class needs as far as income taxes go. I think one, like you rightly said, is clearly to raise the level of taxable income. Right now, we've got a 3 lakh, which is, by my mind, abysmally low. I think it's time to relook at it. Right, a lot of these numbers, like you suggested, have been put in place 5 years, 10 years ago, and that needs to be looked at. So I think one is really lower tax rates. Right, today anybody with an income above 15 lakhs reaches the highest slab. I think there is clearly a case to take that slightly higher, because today you understand that with 15 lakhs in most of our metros, you don't live a very comfortable life. Right, to assume that he's in the highest tax slab, I think is really high. The second point is, I think at 30% in the top slab, I think there is a case for some relief, right? Certainly one could look at maybe a little bit of a shaving there, maybe down to 25%. I think that would help. And I think lastly, if you look at the key elements of deduction, one is the standard deduction, right? Which is currently at 50,000. My mind needs to go at least up to a 75,000, if not to a lakh. That's one part. And then the section 80C threshold, which has remained unchanged, as you rightly pointed out, right from 2014, I think it needs to be raised from at least 1.5 to 2 lakhs, right? And that's in terms of people actually putting in money to various investment options. I think these things are highly overdue. And if you look back at, let's say, the economy being part of the last 3 years, I think the taxpayers have played a key role. Now that GST has stabilized, now that month-on-month there's GST growth, and of course the government has stopped disclosing the latest GST numbers, I think it's time to give the middle class a little bit of a relief. This is the first year of the new government. I think you have to understand that this is the section of the that will power the economy. This is the middle class that drives a lot of consumption. And I think the government needs to address this highly ignored class of consumers.
Mr. Matthews, it's very interesting, because I think one of the criticism or one of the key failings of the finance ministry so far, especially when it comes to middle class, is that there have been no meaningful benefits. For instance, I remember a couple of years ago, the lower tax ceiling was raised from 2.5 to 3 lakhs, and then there was a rebate or something which applied to a taxable income up till 5 lakhs. But after 5 lakhs, the percentage of tax which was cut remained at high. So it's not just enough raising the lower tax limits from, say, 3 lakhs to 4 lakhs. That proportional lowering of tax slabs has to be done across the entire tax range, because you can't have someone paying no tax till 4 lakhs salary income and then suddenly pay 10% or 15% if he or she earns for like 1 rupee per income. The other point you mentioned, Lloyd Matthews, and it's very important for us to go down the mathematics of it. An annual salary of 15 lakhs per income puts one in the highest tax bracket of 30%. 15 lakhs essentially comes down to 1.5 lakhs a month as total CTC. If you remove in hand and other aspects, it probably comes to around 1.1, 1.2 lakhs. On that, you have house rent, which have reached which have soared to the skies, especially in cities like Delhi, Mumbai, or Bengaluru. You have living expenses, you have fuel expenses of commuting to work, office, and back. You have house rents to pay as well. You have EMIs to pay as well. It ultimately comes down to very little, yet for the purpose of the government, they are seen as the highest and the most richest section of the society.
And also, if I could add, Ritangshu, also
Lord
an
Matthews.
easy target, given that the bulk of salaried employees, which is the bulk of where the middle class comes from, have tax deduction at source. So this is really a group that literally has no choice, right? So you actually get your income with tax deducted. And then you are expected to take care of all the expenses you mentioned, right, from a high standard of living, and to a large extent subsidizing a lot of government expenditure, right? And I think that is a concern that this government needs to seriously look at. My sense is that the middle class is deeply concerned. I think they have been pressured. They don't lack they lack the voice that, let's say, certain interest groups like farmers justifiably, like the poorer segments do. I think the middle class is neither big enough to be a real consolidated vote bank and therefore has been repeatedly taken for granted. I think these are areas that need to be done. I think in two important aspects, again, is medical insurance premiums need to be looked at. I think that, again, is the cost of healthcare, specifically for middle class, is going up quite dramatically with a lot of private hospitals. And like you rightly pointed out, the HRA exemption. I mean, having differential slabs from the first four metros, Bombay, Delhi, Cal, and Chennai, versus places like Bangalore, Gurgaon, I think Hyderabad, Ahmedabad, Pune, is completely bizarre. It just doesn't make sense. There's no great standard difference. Maybe Mumbai is a different level, but virtually all the other cities today are pretty much at the same level. So a differential HRA is completely unjustified.
Exactly, and it's even within Delhi. Even within Delhi, Lloyd Mathias, it's not just, I mean, most of the employed workforce from Delhi doesn't really stay in Delhi. They're working in the satellite towns, whether it be Gurgaon specifically, and on Noida as well. And it makes no sense to not put them in the metro bracket just because they're not within the geographical borders of Delhi. Let me also go across to S. Ravirajan, founder of Ravirajan & Co. and also former chairman of the BSc. The reason I'm coming to you, sir, is because just like to also put out that graphic of the current tax rates of the old tax versus the new tax regime. The argument also is that it's not so far as the neglect of tax saving options for the middle class. It's a deliberate move. One is shifting to the new tax regime. The second is it's been, I mean, disincentivizing of tax saving schemes, especially those under Section 80C, has been done deliberately so as to encourage the people of the country or the youth of the country to spend more so that there is remonetization of the economy, particularly post the pandemic. Is that also one of the reasons, sir, that the government is encouraging the income class to not invest or save more money in traditional tax saving schemes, but put a bit more money in the stock markets, put a bit more money in the economy so that the overall health of the economy also increases?
So, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to the show. My first point and my reaction to your statement is that what the government aims is to see that people migrate from the old tax regime to the new tax regime. And that is the whole spirit of it.
Yeah.
And I think if you look at all the deductions that have not been provided in the new tax regime, it's primarily on account of the encouraging the SSEs to go to the new tax regime. The feedback that the government has got through various channels and through various section of people is that the new tax regime needs to be modified in many ways to accommodate many of these things which you mentioned, the benefits, for example, medical allowance. So medical allowance is not, the medical cost and the medical allowance. There is no parity between the two. The standard deduction, which has been just static, that needs to be revised. Then also look at the new pension scheme and what the new pension scheme offers. So that also needs to be modified based on the various feedbacks that the government has got. The new pension scheme which does not have much of safety net, does not help the spouse. And what about super citizens, super senior citizens? They have also to be addressed, because if you go and migrate to the new pension scheme, then what happens to the super citizens, super senior citizens? Sorry. So I would say that the new tax scheme or new regime will have to modify, and I see that the government will modify, and there has to be either the exemption levels will have to be pushed up straight away, and so that what you said about actually the money coming back into the system. So what will happen is the basic exemption should go through a radical change. Means not at 3 lakhs, it should go radically up, so that people have more money to spend, and they can decide and devise what they want to do. The second aspect that I want to add into that is very clearly the slab of 15 lakhs and above. 15 lakhs and above, if you look at the average salary payers, it is very steep, 30% is very steep. And that actually has to be removed. There has to be a new slab introduced, so that what happens is actually 15 lakhs and above get the real benefit of a lesser tax. And I think it's a normal thing to get 15 lakhs and above salary. It's very normal nowadays. And the third aspect is also...
So we all want taxes to be... We all want taxes to be reduced at this point, sir. But the question is, that will require a shift of thinking. Vijay Sardana, please come in here at this point. Is there a need for a shift of thinking to stop looking at the salaried class as potential cash cows? Because again, as all our panelists have been saying, putting the vast majority of the urban salaried tax class in the 30% tax bracket is essentially putting them all in the highest paying tax at this point, without taking into account what their actual cost of living or inflation indices are at this point. Does this require a shift in change from the government to stop looking at the middle class as cash cows and look at them as important bhagidars also in the nation's development and the progress?
See, governments have a very, short-sighted view generally, especially political class. They look at where we can extract as much as possible from a segment of a society, those who will not protest. You bring any, change in the tax regime of transporters, there will be chakka jam, all transporters will go on strike, government will be in fix. You do anything with agriculture and commission agents, those who make the maximum money and pay the least tax, you will not touch them. You will not touch the corporates because they will always give you political funding, so money is coming to you anyway. So you don't want to, hurt that cash cow which is funding the politics of India. The only leftover, I will say that voiceless segment is middle class of India. And I always say that the problem with middle class is neither you have a money power nor you have a vote power. So you are technically a cash cow which can be exploited the way political system wants in this country. And that is why majority of middle class, you will find only discussing in drawing rooms. You will not find them on either on the streets or doing any political funding to mobilize the policies in their favor. So this is the reality. It is a fait accompli for the middle class. That is why middle class has no political say in this country except on news channels or making noise in drawing rooms. So that is what you have to appreciate.
Or on social media. That's a very...
How to mobilize that consolidated view of middle class, intellectual class of India, those who are getting fixed salary. It is for them to think, because for political system, you are useless. Neither you are a vote bank, nor you are a muscle bank.
Okay. So that is actually a very, Mr. Sardana, that's actually a very pessimistic outlook, but a fairly realistic one at this point. I have time for one last response. So I'll let Mr. Ravi have that last word. Sir, is it also incumbent upon our viewers, especially the younger class, salaried class, who worked very hard to increase the take-home pays and increase their annual CTCs, but perhaps are not as financially literate here, who are sometimes offered salary jobs without even a PF deduction so that the in-hand salary goes up? Is it time for them to be a bit more financially literate? We had a graphic on the list of tax-saving options available for you. A lot of them even I am not aware of. Is that the need of the hour, to ensure that whatever money you get, you try and keep on to it as much as possible and pay as little tax?
Financial literacy has been the key, actually. If you look at even how people handle so-called fake calls, etc. Financial literacy is the key for all the people, and those who start employment, they should have absolute specific training and specific knowledge. And there are many centers which give financial knowledge and literacy. It is imperative for everybody to do that. And I think the most important aspect, in my view, is the younger lot of people who join services or go to a job. They should be financially literate. They should know what the income tax offers, how can they save better, and how can they leverage whatever income they get in whichever way they can, maximizing their investment. I think it's very imperative. But on another note,
and I hope our viewers and I hope our viewers get that message at this point. Tomorrow, when the budget comes out, do not be swayed by the macro headlines. Do not be swayed. Do not think that it's too complicated for me and I don't understand it. It impacts your wallet. It impacts your savings. It impacts your cost of living at this point here. And we at Mirana will be there tomorrow throughout the day to break it down to what it means for our viewers, for it means for the middle class, for the salaried taxpayers as well. Thank you so much, Vijay Sardana, Lloyd Matthews, and S. Ravi for joining us on a very short but a very insightful debate. It's time for a short break. More news and updates on the other side. Stay tuned.